I thought your speech was very thought-provoking and very helpful to us. I think we should all remember that it's important to focus on good media. There are many Muslims who unfortunately fulfill the role of portraying Muslims improperly or in a negative light, so it's important for us to focus on the more positive aspects. I also agree that one of the best ways to exemplify this is to show our love of Allah, love of the Prophet, love of the Ahlul Bayt, and in this way we'll show the world what Muslims are truly about. It's also important to be proactive and not reactive, whether in the legislative or in the media spheres. I think what we should remember is exactly what Dr. Crane said, that our efforts have to be focused on a paradigm shift. With that, I would like to invite Mr. Mawahid Shah, who was once the Special Assistant to the Chief Minister of Punjab and is an attorney at law, author, and political analyst. In addition to being an editor of the Eastern Times, Mr. Shah has served as Vice President of the Foreign Correspondents Association of the United States. His works have been published in the Christian Science Monitor, the Washington Post, Worldview, Middle East Insight, the Herald, Nawaya-e-Waqt, and Pakistan Link. As a result, Mr. Shah has served as a political commentator on television and radio, including C-SPAN, CNN, BBC, Fox News, Voice of America, and NBC. Furthermore, he has been a frequent lecturer at the U.S. State Department's Foreign Service Institute, American Institutions, Command and Staff College in Quetta, Pakistan, the National Defense College in Rawalpindi, Pakistan, and the Lahore High Court Bar. He has been a law partner to U.S. Senator James G. Abu Risk and has participated with the Lahore High Court Bar, the District of Columbia Bar, and the United States Supreme Court Bar. Mr. Shah is well known for his active stances on Muslim issues, with a specialization on Kashmir, Palestine, and Bosnia. His educational background includes a BA and LLB from Punjab University and an LLM from the National Law Center at George Washington University. With that, I ask you to welcome Mr. Mawahid Shah to the stage.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Parvez Shah and his group who worked very tirelessly to set up this program. I think it was quite an effort in these days. And I'm very also obliged to very old distinguished friends, Clara and Iman Khan, to be here. And they've done a lot of work for the Muslim community. And particularly privileged to join Dr. Crane, my very old friend. I first met him 20+ years ago at US Capitol. We fell into a conversation. And I asked, this is the first time I'd met him, I said, why don't you write? He says, nobody publishes me. I said, why? He said, because I'm very radical. I said, from now on you're going to be published. Because at that time I was editor of Eastern Times. So that was the beginning of our friendship. You know, it was a pleasure always, including his writings, because two things were always there, intellect and integrity.
Mawahid Shah is the greatest Muslim grand strategist.
Thank you. Yesterday I was watching a movie, old movie. I was having trouble sleeping, very late movie called The Lost Patrol, 1934, John Ford's movie. It's a story of a British patrol caught in Iraq in the First World War. And they were caught in the sand, and they were being killed slowly. And they were caught in a desert trap. And the enemy they felt was unseen. And they had no idea where they were heading and how they could get out. And I was just thinking that nothing has changed in this last 76 years since the movie was made. You know, same issues, same problems, and same quest to look for an exit strategy. Also, the topic which was given to me was the influence of politics on Western media. I was in Pakistan last month and I just came back, and ever since I've come back I've been hearing about the nuclear threats and the atomic proliferation, particularly in the Muslim countries, Iran, Pakistan, elsewhere, you know, non-stop coverage in the media, front pages. Now yesterday I was watching the news, BBC, and I was surprised to see that there was a UN conference, and the Iranian delegation, instead of sitting very glumly or trying to walk out, was clapping. And I was wondering what was happening. And I then followed up and I found out that there was a conference, a month-long conference on nuclear non-proliferation, attended by 189 countries. And they agreed, amazingly. They agreed after a month-long conference, 189 countries finally agreed, pursuant to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, that the Middle East should be declared as a nuclear free zone. Huge thing. And there should be another conference on nuclear proliferation in 2012. And Iran had also signed. I said, this is an amazing news. So I got up very early in the morning and I looked at the Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal in the headlines. No mention of it, nothing. So I said, maybe I got the news wrong, but finally I looked inside. And this is the New York Times. And there's a tragic story of the killings in Lahore, which is very unfortunate, very condemnable. But there was no reference to the amazing agreement, consensus document being agreed to by 189 countries. And finally, after spending 15 minutes, I was able to find a story on page 7, hidden. It was not even mentioned in the index. Then I looked at the Wall Street Journal, couldn't find it on the front page, it was hidden inside. Then finally I looked in the Washington Post, because this is the paper which has been talking that there should be a ban on nuclear weaponry and the spread of nuclear weaponry, and we should have controls. And there was an agreement which was being done at New York, very landmark agreement, nothing mentioned on the front page. And they also was talking of there should be a possibility of attack on Pakistan. That was the main headline in today's newspaper, If maybe Pakistan is not cooperating, if they don't cooperate, maybe we should have an attack. This is ally Pakistan, But finally I discovered why. Then I discovered in the Wall Street Journal that America was very disappointed that Israel was mentioned. That Israel too has to now accept the fact that its nuclear program can be subjected to inspections. And America was very disappointed at that. And because this is political, the media, which supposedly was so passionately committed on the concept of nuclear proliferation, decided to kill the story and put it inside. That shows how politics can basically supersede principles. Many years ago, a lot of young people are sitting here, there was a first attack in the World Trade Center. Let me have a glass of water. And I think that first attack was abortive bombing February 73 at the World Trade Center. I got a call from an Associated Press reporter, very senior reporter, wanting my comments. Then he said, aren't you embarrassed? I said, what? Why? He said, because this was a Muslim. And I kept listening to him, and what are your comments on this? So I basically found out what he was trying to get and where was he heading. And I said that, would you call Colin Powell or Condi Rice? I said, why? I said, would you ask them about the high rate of black crime in Washington, D.C.? And what do they think about it? Quiet. I said, would you call the Italian embassy? I said, why? He said, why? I said, would you call them to explain why the mafia is so active here in Washington and New York and elsewhere in America? No. I said, so this is a very interesting thing, Using individual Muslim misconduct as a tool, to cast the broad net of collective guilt over the entire community. This is a very classic technique. So constantly we are defensive. Oh my God, we are moderates, we are liberals, we are not like that. And we are constantly justifying because we are not prepared to handle it. And this is going to happen day after day after day. And this is not an approach, oh my God, Islam, or whatever scholars say, look here, Muslims can't do it. This is a religion of peace. We are moderates. These are some bad apples, and we have nothing to do with it. It is not working, this defensive strategy. But because of our weaknesses, because of our own weaknesses, the Muslim community is constantly inviting these attacks. Because, for example, the biggest terrorist attack before 9/11 was at Oklahoma, April 1995. And they caught an American military veteran, Timothy McVeigh was caught, But they didn't attack the American army or the American culture for that crime. It was considered as an individual act of Timothy McVeigh. So, and before, for example, people knew that who was behind Oklahoma. I don't know how many people remember the Oklahoma attack. Immediately the Muslims were blamed. And Tom Brokaw, I remember saying, oh, this reminds me of the attack at Lebanon, Beirut, classic. And other people also joined in the Islamic. Then the terminology, Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic terrorism, Islamic extremism. This went on and on. That is one example of politics. Second example, Muslims are told, classic criticism. One has to challenge basically. See, let's see what is the criticism. We are dogmatic, we are rigid, we are obscurantist, we are impervious and oblivious to the pace of the modern world, and we are not moderate. I never ever understood what is the meaning of being moderate, But let's check this, let's test it out first of all. May 16th, 2010, I think just 12 days ago, there was a Miss USA pageant held, and a young lady by the name of Rima Faqih won the crown, Miss USA crown. Now, beautiful lady, very smart, but what happened? When she won the crown, they said, oh my God, have you checked her? She comes from a Lebanese Shia family. And she may have secret terrorist ties. And we think she may be a Hezbollah agent. So I was thinking that if Muslim women cover themselves like they cover in Europe and elsewhere, they are attacked. Why are they wearing a burqa? Why is there a niqab? We should do something to ban it. But when a Muslim woman uncovers herself, first you are attacked because you have covered yourself. But when you uncover yourself, you are still attacked. That you maybe have terrorist ties. So this shows the level of, I think, political thing. Secondly, I have always heard, Sasha Pelakoff published a book, and The Guardian has carried excerpts. In 1975, March 13, 1975, Shimon Peres, who is now the president of Israel, and Botha, Defense Minister of South Africa, they had a deal through which Israel was going to sell nuclear technology to South Africa. Completely illegal. Spreading of nuclear weaponry in Africa. But I was wondering, it was very heavily carried in the Guardian, not at all mentioned in the US media or anywhere. So this also shows why. The question is why. That question should always be asked. Ye kyun ho raha hai aise? I think first of all, as Confucius said, if you point a finger, 3 fingers are pointing at ourselves. Look at our own leadership. We constantly say, oh, we are very successful. We are now so many Muslims here. There are 1.5 billion Muslims. And they are doing very well everywhere in the world. But where is the beef? Look at the Organization of Islamic Conference, 57 countries. Completely ineffective. Completely useless when it matters. Look at the own thing. Look also at the community. Let's be always blame at what is happening in the Muslim country. Look at our own self. It's very important. The time has come to take a very searching look at our own strategy, at our own priorities of living in America. Are we content in being passengers and constantly being targeted, or we like to be pilots of our destiny? That's the question we have to ask. So far, look at the results of this strategy of being passive. Constant targeting. And the innocents are being targeted more. I saw a very interesting movie. I don't know how many people have seen this movie, 3 Idiots. Please raise your hands. And it's a very interesting movie. A child is born in India and Pakistan. Oh, he's going to be a doctor, he's going to be an engineer. Good ambitions. But why, as the theme of the movie was very good, that people who have excellence, success will follow. And people should follow their heart. But already we are scripted, become a doctor, become an engineer by our parents and elders. With the result, what happens? That in the professions which form the paradigm of agenda setting which Dr. Crane had mentioned, is basically law, academia, media, journalism, creative arts, movie making, absence. In the thinking professions, the Muslims don't matter. You look at the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, look even in the letters to the editor. We are very happy to say that our kids speak beautiful English, they are computer literate, very smart, they've got Ivy League education. But where it matters, you don't even see letters to the editor. Why? There's a fear. Oh my God. If we write FBI is going to follow us and somebody is going to get us and something is going to happen to us. Terrible, I think, again, a strategy of perpetual victimhood. That is why I think this wrong emphasis on certain professions has left the field of social sciences and humanities very weak. And this is where I think parents should stress, if their kids are good writers, good speakers, encourage them to follow. The heavens are not going to fall. This is a country, they should own this country. America is not a country for doing mazduri. It's a country now to live, not just to make a living. A country to, not just to work, but a country to live. That should be the mental mindset. So far that is not there. Now look at the Jewish community. Now you hear this term, Judeo-Christian heritage, clash of civilizations. You know, I never heard of this word. I myself have went to the very fanatical Catholic schools. I never heard of this word, Judeo-Christian heritage. Never. Until a few years ago. It's a term of exclusion. The term Islam is not even mentioned. So it seems that this is outside the pale. As if Judaism and Christianity were born in Paris and London and Los Angeles and New York. Not in the Middle East, where it all came from. And it's also a falsifying of history. Because for 2,000 years, Christianity and Judaism were at loggerheads, constantly fighting. Neither side was acknowledging its own. And it's a terrible history. And the fact of the matter is, when I was a law student doing research, I discovered that in the 16th century, when the Jewish community was being harassed by the Vatican, was under severe threat of extinction, it was Suleiman the Magnificent, Suleiman, जिसे कहते हैं Suleiman the Great, Suleiman-e-Azam, who threatened the Vatican that please don't misbehave with the Jewish community because we will invade Rome if you don't misbehave. And that's how they were saved. In 1492, when the Jews were expelled from Spain, who gave them refuge? Turkey and in the Muslim lands. And the real book actually on all this, I think it's very important to know the facts. The real book is written by the man who coined the concept of clash of civilizations. It is Professor Bernard Lewis, Professor Emeritus at Princeton, 94 years old, brilliant scholar. Please read his book called The Jews of... He came up with the concept of clash of civilizations in 1990, which I rebutted through an article in the Christian Science Monitor. My article was New Cold War with Islam, 20 years ago. And he said that everything with the Jewish culture gained in terms of culture, attire, liturgy, faith, language, grammar was gained from Islam. And this book is no longer in circulation, but I'm giving you this book, The Jews of Islam, 1984 edition, Princeton University Press, which tells you. And he used the term Judeo-Christian Islamic civilization. The great Maimonides, who is at the heart of the Jewish culture, was served as a minister in Cordoba, Spain, in Muslim Spain, and is buried in Cairo. So this is the falsification of history because of our own intellectual and moral failures. And we are constantly talked, I was interviewed about 2 months ago. Dr. Parvez Shah heard me for 1 hour on US TV. And I responded to what Sarah Palin had said. Somebody asked Sarah Palin, how can Obama get elected? He says, well, he can only get elected to doing one thing. He has to bomb Iran. Because I think it will be a wonderful thing if he does that. He bombs Iran and he will then get elected, and there's no way he can ever lose the question. But let's examine this so-called, because the commitment. See, never be weak. That's the main lesson. If you are weak, why do bullies pick on kids? Because they see the kids can't fight back. If they know they will get a punch here, you will think twice. It's a human nature. It's a very bad tendency in human condition to attack somebody who is weak. In Pakistan, India, you have brides burnt alive, unfortunately, because of insufficient dowry. Because they know they can get away with it. But if they know they're going to get hit, this won't even happen. Let's examine, for example. I used to play cricket. I loved cricket. I still love it. I used to play cricket at the mall in Washington opposite the Thomas Jefferson Mall. And now I used to go there, one of my favorite places. Now it's a Franklin Delano Roosevelt Museum. To go there, one of my favorite places. Now it's a Franklin Delano Roosevelt Museum. But I never go there. Why? Because this Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who is considered as an icon of American liberalism, that very liberal, very man, New Deal, let's examine the record. See, facts are very important. We are all entitled to our own opinions, but we are not entitled to our own facts. In 1939, when it mattered, when the Jews were being killed in Hitler's Germany, a ship called St. Louis, carrying German Jewish refugees, a ship called St. Louis, carrying German Jewish refugees, went to Miami to seeking asylum. They saw the lights of Miami, but Roosevelt said, no way, I am not going to let anyone come here. He used very bad language, I don't want to mention it here. And they were all sent back, and all of them, most of them, were incinerated, died in concentration camps. This is when it mattered. The same Roosevelt, again an icon of liberalism. You know, during his time, he was the president for 12 years, 1933-45. He died in April 1945. Blacks used to be lynched in the South. He never outlawed it. Because why? Weakness. And I was hearing a few days ago an interview of Rick Warren, Pastor Rick Warren, who wrote this bestseller, Purpose-Driven Life. I don't know how many people have heard him, but he's extremely influential. And you know, David Gregory, I don't like to hear him because I admired Tim Russert. This was a 1-hour program of interview. And 20 minutes he was talking about gay marriage, David Gregory. What is your views on gay marriage? Why? Whosoever has a powerful lobby, people prostrate. That is unfortunately, it's a matter of the human condition. So if you're weak, you will be hit. If you're strong, people will think twice. What to do? That's the question. I think, first of all, internationally, one thing which we should all work for. I will put two things, international weakness and domestic. International weakness, what? We always talk of democracy, representation, that people of majority should have a representation. Today, the Muslim world is the largest religious denomination in the entire world. I said with complete largest. Yet no representation. Look at the United Nations. The principal effective enforcement agency is the UN Security Council with a veto power. So if you have to impose sanctions, you have to go through the UN Security Council. And there are 5 permanent members with veto authority. Britain, France, United States, Russia, China. That means if America wants to impose sanctions on North Korea, all 5 have to agree. One person vetoes, the sanctions can't pass. And I have been an advocate for the last 20 years. I said, please try to admit a Muslim country with a veto power in the UN Security Council. Because now they're trying to expand it. And which are the countries they're recommending? India, Germany, Brazil. No Muslim country. I think here, young Muslim youth, I would say, please make this point, start a campaign that urge that a country like Indonesia, the largest Muslim country, 200 million plus, should have a seat in the UN Security Council, so that Muslim interests, Muslim core concerns are handled, and that can also reduce to a great sense the sense of exclusion, which fuels, and powerlessness and hopelessness, which fuels militancy. One of the real reasons, hidden causes behind militancy. It's a very easy case to make because look at this large Muslim community not represented. And American culture responds to fairness. It's not a favor, it's a question of fairness. That's one thing internationally, only one point. Secondly, for Muslims, take charge of your own destiny in America. Become editors. It's a joke you don't have Muslim editors here. Become journalists. You don't have Muslims giving Muslim points of view. If you have a discussion on Islam, you have Israeli experts coming and talking. And they use the term terrorism and fundamentalism and extremism. Come in the academia. Make your presence felt. And you have a great example, I tell you. Some examples are great. Malcolm X. Now it's very interesting again the influence of politics on the media. Now whenever there's a discussion, the name Martin Luther King comes up. Malcolm X is not mentioned. And he was arguably the greatest black leader of this century. Man of character, who was a brilliant man, wanted to become a lawyer, but his teacher told him, using bad language, that a person of your racial background can't become a lawyer, you should become a carpenter. Then he slid down, went into jail, did a lot of criminal activity, but in jail he discovered Islam. And his basic politics was very militant, very separatist, but then he went to Mecca. And he discovered that yes, there are yellow people, black people, brown people, white people, but they're all praying in the same language to God, Arabic. So he discovered the universality of Islam, the impact of Islam to break the tribal barriers, and how Islam was a great bridge builder. So this man was killed, and yet when the discussions take place, his name is never even mentioned. But then, to Clinton's credit, he was the man who became the first Muslim whose face appeared on a US stamp 15 years ago, Malcolm X. Muhammad Ali also, when he changed his name after beating Nixon, immediately he was attacked. His title was taken away. But then he came back. He made his mark in America because of his character and courage and spirit, and never to decide. Today he is considered as a sportsman of the century. So you have two examples. The third example I would give again is Obama. Because it's amazing the ignorance in America despite all the education. I think it's in the mind that about 15% Americans think he's still a Muslim. So they have elected a Muslim president in the minds of 15% Americans. And I was reading this article in the Christian Science Monitor. I have it in front of me. This was in May 31 issue of Christian Science Monitor. Used to be a great paper. It says, the writer Kevin Harnett said, I find it hard to understand the depth of the anger Obama has inspired. He's quite amazed. He says maybe it's his skin color or his middle name, Hussein. So this is what I said. But Obama was able to triumph. Constantly he was being attacked. And I was not very unhappy when Obama was being attacked as a Muslim. Because I felt, when Obama was being attacked as a Muslim, I was not very unhappy. Because I felt that those who were attacking Obama because of his Muslim-sounding name are doing a service to Muslims in America. Because it confirmed the depth of the anti-Muslim prejudice in key pockets of America. So they did a service actually in that, by doing that. But trying to constantly exclude, the constant exclusion carries its own repercussions. Again, I was talking of being moderate. Turkey. Turkey was given for a long time symbol of secular, moderate country as an example for the Muslim world. And let's examine this moderate course of Turkey. Turkey had recognized Israel. Muslim countries are told to recognize Israel to show their credentials as liberal and moderates who can live peacefully. Turkey did. Turkey banned communism because at that time there was a big struggle against communism. Turkey banned it. Turkey also became member of the NATO forces. The largest standing army after America. Tremendous army. Turkey also gave its base Incirlik, which became, I think, the launching pad for the first Gulf War. Turkey also has an agreement with Israel, very significant air agreement, because Israeli planes can't do aerial exercises in Israel because of the smallness of space. So they use Turkish space. Now, having done everything, Turkey even banned a Muslim girl who was wearing a hijab, who joined the parliament. She was expelled, and there were thoughts of even confiscating her citizenship. But having done that, let's see, what did Turkey get? An old European leader told me years ago in Pakistan that whatever Turkey does, we will never let Turkey come into the European Union. And now what has happened? Having been pushed, what has Turkey done? That Turkey says, okay, done it. So Turkey has basically now asserting itself on the international stage. It condemned Israeli assault on Gaza. It led efforts along with Brazil to block sanctions against Iran. And it has also signed a very important strategic agreement with its old enemy, Russia. So these are the perils of excluding people. So essentially, it's a battle of idea. And finally, my last point is that two things. On the issue of acceptance and tolerance, I think Muslims should accept honestly that they are very weak in America. And their influence is not at all proportionate to the size. But they should not tolerate it. That's the most important thing. That's where I feel there should be intolerance against this sense of weakness. Recognize and accept that they are weak, but not tolerate it. That is the first thing. And how? By caring more about others and daring more. They have seen the results of indifference and being timid. Now try the results of caring more and daring more. And at the end I say that the Muslims are so fortunate that they have this supreme example of a supreme sacrifice, of a supreme individual whose name is going to live through eternity, Imam Hussain. That should be the role model. When Hussain took his march to Karbala, he didn't have the United Nations behind him. He didn't have any NATO forces behind him. He didn't have cruise missiles. He just had his Iman. And for that, he sacrificed everything. And today, he continues to march through the imagination of mankind. And he will continue to march forever. That is why that's the role model to follow, the role model of Hussainiyat. And inshallah, this 21st century will belong as an Islamic century. Thank you very much.